Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Paris Schutz has the evening off. Here's what we're looking at.
Our job is to inject the community's voice into the process, so we hear you all loud and clear.
Chicagoans sound off on the next police superintendent.
I had a mission and an agenda that I wanted to achieve, and I feel that I've done that.
Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx will not be seeking re-election. We take a look at her record. Fears that hundreds of thousands of Illinoisans could lose their Medicaid coverage.
We're going to get behind you and push you, but you have to put the work in.
A holistic approach for residents returning from incarceration.
I'm totally stoked about working here.
And excitement builds for a fossil hunting expedition in the Arctic. And now to our top story tonight. A defiant Kim Foxx announces today that after a bruising 8 years in office, she will not seek a third term as Cook County State's attorney, leaving the office without an incumbent running for re-election for the first time in 16 years. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. Heather, this announcement caught a lot of people by surprise, especially since the Democratic primary is just 11 months away, if you can believe it. Let's listen to how Foxx broke the news.
I didn't set out to be a career politician. When I became state's attorney, I knew that I had a mission and an agenda that I wanted to achieve, which was fairness, justice, and equity. I feel that I've done that.
Heather Foxx said that she was leaving by her choice. Why not run for a third term?
Well, there's no doubt that the last 8 years, or it will be 8 years, has been bruising personally and politically. She has been a lightning rod for controversy locally and nationally, and that toll was really apparent during her speech today. She wanted to go out on her own terms, and as you heard her say, she felt like she had accomplished what she set out to do back in 2016.
Now, she delivered a fierce defense of her record during her speech, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic triggered a surge of crime and violence that has yet to fully recede. Let's listen.
I refute the supposition that where we see ourselves today, with the rise in violent crime that coincides with the once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, is somehow the result of the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. It just doesn't add up. To suggest that this administration is somehow responsible for a rise in violent crime is disingenuous at best and a lie.
So what does her record show?
Well, her first 3 years in office, crime and violence dropped each of those years, only to see that progress roll back as the pandemic gripped Chicago. So she's not wrong. It's not really fair to sort of put everything that happened in terms of crime and violence on her office. Of course, it's a very complicated issue, but there is no doubt that if she did seek a third term in office, she would have to answer for that increase, just as we saw Mayor Lori Lightfoot vulnerable on those issues in the mayoral election.
So Foxx was the first black woman to serve as the county's top prosecutor, defending her support for efforts to end cash bail and to reduce the number of people arrested for nonviolent crime jailed before their trials. Here she is again.
Without apology, my efforts on bail reform were centered in the Black and brown community.
Some of her work in Cook County, Heather, laid the foundation for what would become statewide changes. Where does that stand?
Well, we're waiting for the Illinois Supreme Court to hear arguments and whether or not the General Assembly had the authority to end cash bail statewide. But it's clear that that law never would have been passed had it not been for Kim Foxx, along with County Board President Tony Preckwinkle, pushing through those changes and giving the state a model how it could work.
Of course, Foxx had to acknowledge her handling of the Jussie Smollett case and that would overshadow much of her work. Let's listen.
Probably when I leave this earth, my epitaph, my obituary will mention Jussie Smollett. Makes me mad.
A lot more personality out of Kim Foxx there. Is that fair? What would Foxx like to be remembered for?
Well, you know, really history is going to have to decide about whether it's fair. It's clear she did mishandle that entire hullabaloo, and that even though an investigation cleared her of any wrongdoing, she would much rather be remembered for overturning more than 200 wrongful convictions and freeing people who were wrongly incarcerated because, she said, of misconduct by the Chicago Police Department. And that's why the police department's union made her really public enemy number one for much of her time in office.
Okay, State's Attorney Kim Foxx stepping down, well, not stepping down today, announcing she will not run for re-election today. Heather Sharon on the story. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news. And now to some more of today's top stories. President Joe Biden says he wants to finish the job. He released a video this morning announcing his re-election bid for the 2024 presidential election.
Let's finish this job. I know we can, because this is the United States of America. There's nothing, simply nothing we cannot do if we do it together.
And in the Biden campaign will be some familiar Illinois faces. Senator Tammy Duckworth, who will serve as campaign co-chair, and Quentin Foxx, a former top political advisor to Governor J.B. Pritzker, will serve as principal deputy campaign manager. City officials and members of the Chicago Fire Soccer Club break ground on a controversial training facility. The soccer team is building a new 53,000 square foot performance center on the near west side on land formerly used for public housing. But the facility has drawn criticism from neighbors, housing advocates, and alderpeople who say the site should instead be used for affordable housing. The Chicago Housing Authority demolished most of the units that were once on the property, saying it would build nearly 2,500 new units. But WTTW News and ProPublica reported that only over 600 had been built. This year's mayoral runoff received the most ballots, more than any other mayoral election since 1999. Citywide turnout came out to a little over 38%, and most voters took advantage of the day of fanfare, with the highest percentage of voters casting their ballot in person on Election Day. Up next in the program, community members say what they want in the city's next police chief. Nick Blumberg with that story right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Backing from the rank and file, removing racist officers, protecting marginalized communities. Those are just some of the priorities Chicagoans said they have for the next police superintendent during a virtual forum held earlier tonight. Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg was listening in and joins us now. Nick, remind us what some of these forums are.
Sure. Well, Brandis, this is all part of the new process for choosing Chicago's new top cop. This was the third community forum where Chicagoans get to highlight their priorities and suggest some candidates. You know, we love to have our 2 cents.
Of course.
So this virtual forum, as with the others, was hosted by the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability. That's the new body that, among other things, is charged with coming up with 3 candidates for Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson to choose from after he takes office. Now, commission members say they'll be using the public's input as they interview and narrow down the applicants. At tonight's forum, residents had a wide range of concerns about the superintendent candidates, the CPD's relationship with the community, and with the search process itself.
I think it's paramount that one of the main criteria that you consider is that the candidate have the confidence of the rank and file police officers in the Chicago Police Department.
We need to teach our kids not to hate police, not to fear police. And this is what I hear all the time. This will not work if we don't all work together.
We are in a public health crisis. And one of the biggest challenges that we are facing right now in the midst of this crisis is a distrust towards our law enforcement.
I research white supremacists in policing in our country. I'm really concerned about the 14 known officers with ties to hate groups in the CPD.
I think It's great if there are going to be more of these forums, but I think at least one, if not two of them, need to be primarily Spanish. Language translation services are great, but those can be tedious to apply for or obtain.
And Nick, what do we know about who's in the running for the job?
Well, it's a nationwide search, but folks have expressed a lot of interest at these forums in hiring someone local, someone with experience working with CPD or in CPD. Now, among the names that have been reported are several current commanders and former CPD chiefs. At a forum last week and at tonight's event, we heard a lot of different names suggested, but Mayor-elect Johnson will also have to work quickly to find an interim superintendent, given that the current interim, Eric Carter, announced he's stepping down effective May 15th, Johnson's inauguration day.
And Nick, what's the timeline like for finding a permanent superintendent?
Well, candidates have until May 7th to apply. The commission putting the recommendations together has until July 15th to send them to then Mayor Johnson, who has a month to choose one or ask for another slate. Now, we spoke with Interim Commissioner Ramel Terry at a forum last week, and she said they have seen an outpouring of interest from residents in this process.
This is something that is over, 50 years or so in the making. And so I think we're already seeing the fruits of that, like how involved, how engaged the community is. Also in sort of the relationships we've been able to forge with all of the various policing agencies, including the Chicago Police Department.
Commissioners announced tonight they're having 3 more superintendent search forums. That's 2 more than previously announced. They're set for May 4th, 10th, and 22nd. And the commission also has its regular monthly meeting on Thursday. We'll have the details about all of that on our website.
Lots of opportunities for that public input that Chicagoans appreciate so much. Nick, thank you so much.
No problem.
And there's more Chicago Tonight just ahead. Please stay with us. Hundreds of thousands of Illinoisans who currently get health care through Medicaid are now at risk of losing their coverage. That's because emergency measures designed to ensure people didn't lose their health care during the COVID-19 pandemic are now being phased out. Those measures suspended the requirement that people prove their eligibility for the government-backed insurance program each year. But now those eligibility requirements are back. Joining us to tell us more is Samantha Olds-Fry, CEO of the Illinois Association of Medicaid Health Plans, a membership organization of Medicaid providers in Illinois. Samantha, thanks for joining us. What kind of eligibility do people have to prove now?
So Medicaid is an income-based program. And so essentially what folks are having to prove is first that they live in Illinois and that their income makes them eligible for the Medicaid program.
Okay. So, of course, this could impact as many as 700,000 Illinoisans. Does everyone does everyone who currently receives Medicaid, do they all have to prove that eligibility?
So this is a federal requirement. There are currently over 3.7 million folks. Over a quarter of our state's population rely on the Medicaid program for their health care. And the federal government requires the state and all states review eligibility annually, separate and apart from this public health emergency, of course. And so the state of Illinois has a process where they can verify 30 to 40% of Medicaid members essentially automatically with information that they already have through the Department of Employment Security and payroll receipts and other things. But the other 70 to 60% all have to send in this paperwork in order to maintain their coverage. Now, what is really important, though, is as we sort of talk about this timeline, is that it's not happening all at once. There's not an eligibility cliff. It'll happen over the next 12 months, starting May 1st.
And on what grounds might someone lose coverage?
So there are areas where folks have just received raises, they've gotten promotions, they're working more hours. As we know, the economy looks really different now than it did in, say, April of 2020, thankfully. And so there are definitely people who just have a higher income, they're eligible for health insurance on the exchange, or they might even have an employer that offers health insurance. So for those folks, what we're saying is they're not going to lose coverage, they're going to transition coverage, and they're eligible for other healthcare coverage. But what our concern is, where we're most focused, is simply on people who lose coverage, not because of eligibility, but because of paperwork. And we want to make sure that people don't fall through the cracks to the best of our ability and lose much needed healthcare coverage.
And to that point, Samantha, what is being done to make folks aware that this requirement is returning?
So the Medicaid health plans, who I represent, are reaching out to their members based off of when they're eligible for redetermination. So if a member's not eligible until, next February, we're going to reach out closer to when they're eligible. But we're beginning texting, calling, postcards, letting their providers know, letting the pharmacies know. The federal government's also working with CVS and Walgreens. The state of Illinois has rolled out an $8 million multi-channel campaign to make sure folks know about it. And then, of course, there are people like me coming on here to talk to you and to talk to your viewers. And then, of course, working with community-based organizations, homeless shelters, food banks, schools, trying to make sure that people know that this is coming. A lot of people who've joined the Medicaid program since March of 2020 have never even gone through this. They don't know this process. And, I think it's sort of human nature to not like paperwork. And so really it's our goal to let people know it's coming. Make sure HFS has their address, and then help them return the paperwork when it's their turn to redetermine.
Of course, a lot of work to spread the word there. That's where we'll have to leave it. Samantha Olds-Frey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, a holistic approach to helping residents released from prison reintegrate into their communities. Stay with us. For people who are formerly incarcerated, release from prison brings a new set of challenges. Many find themselves facing housing insecurity, difficulty finding a job, and struggling to reintegrate. St. Leonards Ministries was founded in 1954 as a halfway house for men returning from incarceration. Since then, their mission has expanded to include job training, health care, and educational support for reentering men and women. But they say the most important thing they offer their residents is time to heal. As part of WTTW's ongoing initiative, Firsthand, Life After Prison, producer Erica Gunderson has this story.
I wear many hats here. So sometimes I'm a counselor, sometimes I'm just an ear for someone to listen to.
As intake and housing manager at St. Leonards Ministries, David Harris helps people returning from incarceration successfully re-enter their communities. And he says he knows they can do it because he's done it himself.
I came through the program back in 1996 myself. So I've been through substance abuse, I've been homeless, and I've been through the system. But what I did is I chose to change my life through educating myself. And then giving it back now, it's like looking in the mirror.
In the nearly 70 years St. Leonards has maintained its quiet presence on the West Side, Executive Director Zach Schrantz says the nonprofit has grown far beyond its original mission of providing housing for men exiting incarceration.
We are not just a housing provider. We're not just a workforce development provider. We're not just a mental health provider. We're not just a physical health provider. And we're not just substance abuse and recovery supports. We're all of those things. There's just so many obstacles that get put in the way of our men and women as they become returning residents. So we provide all of our services from housing to all of our workforce programs, free of charge.
Though St. Leonards offers many kinds of support, it begins with housing, both transitional and permanent. David Rosa says the 42 furnished units at St. Andrew's Court on the campus allow residents to ease into independence at their own pace.
It also establishes the fact that if they've been here over a year with us, and they've been paying rent and everything like that, it helps in regards to when they go out there and apply for an apartment out there, that they can use us as a reference. And there's a lot of guys that get here and never been on a lease before, never had an apartment, but they can come in and they can feel that they're home. And that's what the whole thing was about.
And job training is just steps away at the Barlow Center. Chef instructor Golden Moore left a career in fine dining to teach a comprehensive culinary skills course at St. Leonard's.
In addition to us learning about food, we also learn how to be professional, how to respect each other, how to encourage and root for each other. Because sometimes you never know what a person is dealing with or whatever their background is. So we're more like a family here.
A 14-week construction skills course taught by Jonathan Wilson prepares participants for trade apprenticeships and industry jobs.
We're learning to frame a house. So to build a house from the ground up, we're learning framing, electrical, plumbing, roofing. They leave well enough where they can work for like housing management companies to become handyman. Like it's a wide range of ways that they can go.
St. Leonard's leadership says the proof their holistic approach works is recidivism rates that are a fraction of the state average.
There's a growing recognition that society is better if we figure out better ways to welcome and incorporate returning residents.
And we're here to help each other be successful in our journey.
Someone said this at a last graduation. He said he was broken when he came here, and I know what he mean by that, you know. And you can be broken, but then you got a place to heal.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Erica Gunderson.
And you can find more on all of St. Leonard's, all that they have to offer on our website. And you can see much more about life after prison at WTTW.com/firsthand. Up next, into the lab with paleontologist Neil Shubin.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
University of Chicago paleontologist Neil Shubin is gearing up for his latest expedition. The pandemic-delayed trip is a return to the Canadian Arctic for Shubin and an area where he made a career-defining discovery. Back in 2004, he and his team found Tiktaalik, a so-called missing link fossil of one of the first creatures to emerge from the water onto land. Chicago Tonight producer Paul Kane recently caught up with Shubin at his lab and began by asking him where his passion for paleontology came from. Here's another look.
I was always a science nerd, always. You know, I loved astronomy, geology, archaeology. This is when I was a kid in high school. And my parents fostered all my interests. They bought me a telescope when I was a kid. They put up with every hobby I had. Then when I got to college, I went to school near one of the great museums in the country, which is the American Museum of Natural History. And I volunteered there. And I got to know the paleontologists. And here I saw these people going out in the field, all these different places in the world, from South America to China to Africa, and coming back with these treasures that told us about the history of life. And I said to myself, I kind of want to learn how to do that. The whole idea is to find places around the world that have rocks of the right age and the right type to answer the question that you're interested in. And in this case, the question I was interested in was the transition from fish to land-living animal. Well, if that's your approach, it becomes this global Easter egg hunt. This is a little creature we found in Antarctica in 2019. And you can see all this white here, that's bone. So these are really cool maps. These are geological maps that are color-coded to show what kind of rocks are where, right? And so this is how we find the right places to work. So we discovered Tiktaalik rosea, the fishapod, right here in 2004. These are rocks that are about 375 million years old. It's a long time horizon to find anything in the places I work. For the Arctic, it took 6 years. And the reason for that is these fossils are relatively small, and the Arctic is a huge place. One of the great joys about doing this research is we're going to places nobody's walked before. So we find very little evidence of human impact there, which makes it really special. For me, the absolute most exciting part is dropping on a new place for the first time, seeing the rocks and trying to figure out where's the treasure going to be. For me, that's the most exciting thing. This summer, we want to go down here. We know there are fossils in these areas. These rocks are too good not to hold fossils. I'm totally stoked about working here. I mean, I wanted to be here in 2020. That was canceled. 2021, that was canceled. 2022, that was canceled. 2023, let's do this. That's kind of where we're at right now. So here in this part of the lab, as opposed to the fossil part, what we look at is DNA, and we look at embryos. And we ask the question, how does a fish, a living fish, a trout, a salmon, any fish alive today, how does a fish differ from a land-living animal, like a frog or a mouse or a bird or a human? Well, One part of the answer can go from traveling around the world and finding fossils that tell us about how that happened, the sequence of evolutionary changes from fish to land-living animal. But another approach, the approach we do in this part of the lab, is to ask the question genetically. How do the genes that build the fin of a fish differ from the genes that build the arm of a human or the wing of a bird or the limb of a frog? Those two approaches together really give us a much more complete answer than either one alone. One of the really interesting discoveries is that many of the genes that were active to build our own hands and feet are active in the fins of fish, making the terminal ends of their fins. So part of the evolution of limbs from fins didn't involve the origin of new genes. We have the same DNA. It's really using the old DNA in new ways. It's repurposing at the genetic level, which is really kind of profound.
Very cool, as always. Neil Shubin leaves for his Arctic adventure in July and will be there for a month. More details about his trip on our website. One note before we go, starting Monday, May 1st, you'll be able to watch Chicago Tonight here on WTTW and streaming live at 5:30 p.m. That is in addition to our 10 p.m. broadcast. So mark your calendars and tune in at 5:30 Monday, May 1st. And that is our show for this Tuesday night. For all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.